chances are very high you might not have heard of the Tad the Lost Explorer movies. Positioned as a light-hearted, computer-animated Indiana Jones for kids, their adventures starring a clumsy wannabe archaeologist, Tad. The franchise is big in Spain, but relatively little known elsewhere. There are currently 3 movies in the series, and, for the most part, they're rather charming and amusing throwbacks to the sort of pulpy, globe-trotting adventure, which don't see much anymore. They're also legitimately funny in just about all the right spots. Tad the Lost Explorer, Craziest and Madness Edition on the Nintendo Switch, is based on the 3rd movie in the series, Tad the Lost Explorer and the Emerald Tablet. For the most part, it's a fairly faithful adaptation of the source material, and a throwback to the sorts of licensed games we just haven't seen much of lately, which can either be a blessing or a curse, depending on your fondness for them. Tad the Lost Explorer places you in the shoes of the titular intrepid adventurer, and, occasionally, his friends, as they rush to secure the legendary Emerald Tablet before it falls into the wrong hands and brings about all sorts of nasty stuff. Oh, and you'll have to use it to undo a spell on your pets, and your faithful annoying sidekick, Mummy. The game tells a story through a mix of CG cutscenes, narrated comic panels, and plenty of in-game cinematics. While the game is fairly faithful, it does take some liberties with the story to invigorate the gameplay, such as justifying patrolling enemies in a boss fight or 2. It does expect you to be familiar with the franchise, or at least have seen the last movie, as there are no character introductions or any background information dumps to bring newcomers up to speed. And to be honest, if you aren't familiar with the movies, you'll be missing out on some of the game's attempts at humour and charm. Unfortunately, the game suffers from what is either really poor translation or just bad writing. The tone and style of the comic panels fits the movies well, especially with the voice actor for the Mummy narrating. But the in-game dialogue more often than not left me having to reread several sentences just to make sure I was getting the gist of what was said. Often, it felt as though some of the dialogue had simply been dropped into some online translator. Gameplay-wise, Tad the Lost Explorer is a dip back into gaming's past, taking its inspirations from the side-scrolling platformers from the 8 and 16-bit era. This 2.5D side-scroller, which features fairly accurate character designs, will have you running, jumping, and infrequently puzzling across a variety of levels that slowly grow in size, more so than in complexity. There's some infrequent combat using a deadly rubber chicken, and in movie joke of course, and a plethora of traps, spikes, and slow-moving animals to avoid. Occasionally the game will swap Tad out for another member of the cast, and each comes with their own special moves. Sara can double jump, Ra Amon A can float and around the state of specific objects, while Mummy can quickly disguise himself as a museum piece for some rare stealth sections. Now there is a floatiness to all the jumping that generally helps with the platforming, but at times can also be a hindrance when traversing smaller platforms. It's easy enough to get into every corner of the level, on the hunt for collectible brushes, postage stamps, and relics all waiting to be discovered. That said, there were some moments when the controls weren't as responsive as they needed to be, and I encountered one section where things weren't triggering correctly until I rebooted the game and restarted the level. Of course, Tad the Lost Explorer is aimed at kids, and as such, it is incredibly easy for any veteran of the platformer genre. Even with the one-hit kill system, it requires a very low level of skill, and an incredibly generous checkpoint system ensures that death is never an obstacle to progression. You could argue Tad the Lost Explorer has nothing you haven't seen before or would be unable to handle, but its brevity makes the game's lack of innovation more acceptable. That said, I can't help but feel that, considering the source material, there's a wasted opportunity here to make something more ambitious and engaging, rather than a typical tie-in product. Another potential issue is the low resolution on the Switch version, which results in character models looking rather fuzzy up close. From a distance during general gameplay it's fine, but there are moments when the resolution dips and gives everything that blurry look. Aside from a lack of ambition and a few niggles, Tad the Lost Explorer, Craziest and Madness Edition, is still a competent and engaging platformer, with a focus on pleasant, if not particularly challenging gameplay. For fans of the movie, it might be a nice add-on to the existing franchise and a good way to get younger gamers into platformers. For older gamers, you get to indulge in some nostalgia for games of yore, without any of the frustration. If you've got this far, please consider giving the video a like and maybe subscribing to our channel, as it helps us grow.